The power cut out just as I was halfway through grilling a ribeye. 1 second, the sizzle of the steak was my only concern. The next, total silence. No hum from the fridge.
No AIC.
Just the sound of a neighbor's dog barking like it knew something was off too. I stepped inside, flipped the light switch 3 times, and stood there in the dark. Great, I muttered. Here we go. I knew this wasn't a regular outage. It was too targeted. My house was the only one on the block without power. Every porch light on my street still glowed, like nothing had happened. I had a feeling. And when I have a feeling, I'm usually right. It didn't take long to confirm it. A folded, smug little note was taped to my front door.
Hoa let the head. Red ink.
Threatening language. I didn't even need to read past the first line to know exactly who was behind it. Dear Mr. Zeke Easton, it began. Already, I could hear her nasal voice in my head. Due to your failure to pay the Homeowners Association late fee of $75 within the 10-day grace period, the board has enacted an emergency enforcement clause granting us the right to suspend non-essential utilities. Your power has been disconnected until the outstanding balance, plus a late administrative fee, is paid in full. It was signed, of course, by Vonda Kensington, HOA president and self-declared queen of the cul-de-sac. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the dark kitchen. $75. A late fee for a payment I had already mailed in last week. And she cut my power? I dealt with Vonda's petty antics before. She fined me $200 last summer for leaving my trash bin out too long after pickup 30 minutes past the supposed limit. She once yelled at my kid for drawing with chalk on the sidewalk. But this was a whole new level of crazy. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I grabbed my phone and called a guy I'd used before, Arlo, a local electrician who didn't ask too many questions. He picked up after 2 rings.
Zeke?
You all right? Power's out. HOA cut it. That legal? No, but I'll pay you double if you can swing by tonight. He showed up in 20 minutes flat, headlights sweeping across my driveway. I met him by the side of the house with a flashlight and a 6-pack. They pulled the main breaker, he said after a quick look. Deliberately. Tamper tag's broken too. Can you reconnect it?
Hell yeah.
But this ain't gonna be cheap if they damaged anything.
Good.
I want you to charge me.
Triple.
And itemize everything. Arlo raised an eyebrow. Triple?
Yep.
I'm billing it to Vonda. He laughed. Now we're talking. It took him less than an hour to get everything back up. The steak was a lost cause, but the lights came back on, the AC kicked in, and my fridge buzzed back to life. Arlo handed me the invoice 3 pages long. Labor. Emergency call rate. Travel time. Equipment replacement. Tamper repair. Total cost? $1,420. The next morning, I marched over to the HOA office at the community center. Vonda's little Honda was already parked out front, as usual, tucked neatly between the lines like her personality. I walked in and caught her just as she was sipping her morning tea, her desk a shrine to passive-aggressive authority. A sign read, "Respect the rules," and a framed picture of her shaking hands with the mayor hung crooked above her head. She looked up, all smug and syrupy sweet. Mr. Easton, have you come to settle your fee? Actually, I've come to deliver yours. I dropped Arlo's invoice on her desk. She blinked. What's this? That's the bill for illegally tampering with my power. You owe me $1,420. Due within 10 days, or I'll have to refer this to my attorney.
She scoffed.
You're joking?
Nope.
You tampered with private property. That's a felony under state law. I've already filed a complaint with the city inspector, and I've got an affidavit from my electrician confirming the damage. Vonda's lips twitched, but she tried to hold her ground. You were late on a fee, Mr. Easton. The HOA has the right. No, it doesn't. I checked the bylaws last night. You're allowed to assess fines, not cut utilities. That's way outside your authority. So, unless you want to explain to a judge why you shut off power to a residential home over $75, I suggest you pay the invoice. She stood up, flustered now. I'll need to speak with the board. Do that. And let them know I've got security footage from my doorbell cam showing your maintenance guy messing with my breaker box. I'm happy to show it to the police. I turned and walked out without waiting for a reply. Back home, I printed 5 copies of the invoice and taped them up around the neighborhood. Title in bold, HOA cut my power. Here's what they owe me. I posted it on the community Facebook page too. By noon, I had 5 neighbors asking for copies of the bylaws. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd been hit with shady fines or threats. Vonda had been running the HOA like her personal kingdom for years, handing out violations for unapproved holiday lights, lawn chairs, even kids playing basketball in the driveway. But this time, she'd gone too far. And I wasn't done yet. By the time the sun slipped behind the ridge and the porch lights blinked on across the neighborhood, the street buzzed with more chatter than I'd heard in months. What started as quiet curiosity had grown into something sharper, a collective realization that the HOA had finally gone too far. Folks I barely spoke to, like Mr. Jensen, who always mowed his lawn in jeans, or Angela from across the way who ran the daycare, stopped me during my evening walk, asking questions, sharing their own stories. One guy, Daryl, told me Vonda's cousin had been hired to pressure wash the clubhouse last spring, billed the HOA nearly $5,000, and left half the siding still covered in mildew. She's slick, man, Daryl said. Been playing this game for years. You just caught her with her hand in the wrong cookie jar. Inside, I pulled out my legal folder. It wasn't just a prop. I used to work in city code enforcement before retiring. I knew the difference between a fine and a felony. And now I had a thick file with timestamps, footage, and a notarized statement from Arlo. I even pulled the HOA's articles of incorporation from the county website. Turns out they were never updated after the last treasurer resigned 3 years ago. Which meant every decision Vonda made since then, including her re-election, might be invalid. The next morning, a certified letter landed on my doorstep from Vonda's desk. She must have stayed up late trying to salvage things. The envelope was stiff, the kind you use when you want to look official. Inside, she claimed the power shutoff had been an unfortunate maintenance miscommunication and insisted I cease posting defamatory materials around the neighborhood. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and walked it straight to the Oak County Sheriff's Department. Detective Emery was the one who took my statement. He wore a brown windbreaker with a faded badge stitched over the chest and smelled faintly of cheap tobacco. He listened without interrupting, flipping through the documents I brought with the kind of focus you see in someone who knows they've stumbled into something bigger than expected. She authorized this cut? He asked, tapping the electrician's invoice. She signed the order. Her maintenance guy is on my camera pulling the breaker. Emery leaned back in his chair. That's tampering with a residential utility. In this state, that's not just civil, it's criminal. Especially if it causes damage. Did you lose anything in the fridge? Steaks. Couple hundred in groceries. Write it all down. We'll need a full loss inventory. And let me guess, this maintenance guy isn't licensed? His name is Ricky. He's her nephew. Emery let out a slow whistle. This just keeps getting better. Back home, I started compiling a timeline. I didn't want my case to be a mess of anecdotes. I wanted it airtight. I also called a friend, Carla, who worked in the county recorder's office. She owed me a favor from back when I helped her fight a zoning dispute with her own HOA. Can you pull up all contractor payments filed by the Willowbend HOA over the past 5 years? She hesitated, but only for a moment. If it's public record, I can. Want it emailed or printed? Both. By lunch, I had a spreadsheet. It was worse than I thought. Payments had gone to a half-dozen companies with no business licenses, all sharing the same 3 addresses. One of them belonged to Vonda's sister. Another was her ex-husband. The third was a PO. Box registered under a shell company, Civic Solutions Group. I drove down to the county clerk's office and pulled the articles on Civic Solutions. It was filed under a dummy manager, someone named Brady Corwin. I called in one more favor from a buddy who worked at the DMV. 30 minutes later, I had a photo of Brady Corwin. It was Ricky, Vonda's nephew. I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I redrafted my complaint, this time sending it to the district attorney's office, attaching everything I had: fraudulent payments, utility tampering, false contractor documents, and potentially embezzled HOA funds. The total misused amount exceeded $60,000. The next morning, 3 unmarked cruisers parked outside the HOA office. Vonda was let out in handcuffs, her pastel sweater clashing hard against the red and blue lights. Neighbors gathered silently, watching as the queen of the cul-de-sac was escorted into the back of a patrol car. No one said a word. Not even her closest supporters. I caught Jerry from Lot 6 whispering to his wife, thought she was untouchable. She wasn't. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Detective Emery. "You've done our job for us, Easton," he said. DA's filing charges for misappropriation of HOA funds, fraud, and unlawful tampering. We're adding conspiracy to the list too.
Good, I said.
But what happens now to the HOA? That's up to your neighborhood. You've got enough signatures on that petition to call an emergency board meeting. Elect a new interim committee. Clean house. I hadn't mentioned the petition before, but it had been circulating quietly since the first night. I didn't start it, Angela did, but I signed it just like 53 other homeowners. We only needed 49. That evening, we held the emergency meeting under the string lights at Daryl's backyard. Someone brought folding chairs. Someone else brought brisket. It felt more like a block party than a political coup, but that's exactly what it was. I didn't run for board president. I didn't need the headache. Instead, we voted in Angela, who had a background in accounting and had spent the last decade managing a daycare with tighter books than most law firms. She stood up with a clipboard and addressed the group. "First order of business," she said, "we're hiring a third-party auditor to go through every financial transaction from the past 5 years. Then, we're rewriting the bylaws with a real lawyer and putting every major decision to a vote. No more secret fines. No more fake contractors. No more power games." Someone clapped. Then everyone did. I stood near the back, arms crossed, watching the neighborhood take its first real breath in years. Later that night, I found a folded note on my doormat. No envelope. Just a single line, written in block letters. "You'll regret this." No signature, but I didn't need one. I installed 3 more cameras the next morning, one by the garage, one behind the shed, and one at the side gate. Because even though Vonda was gone, Ricky wasn't. And something told me he wasn't finished yet. I didn't expect Ricky to show up again. Not after the arrests, not after everything we dug up about the fake companies and forged invoices. But 3 days after Vonda's dramatic exit, I caught him idling in a rusted gray pickup across the street from my house. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, sunglasses on, windows halfway down, music turned low enough that I couldn't place the song. At first, I considered ignoring him, but then I remembered the note. The one that hadn't been signed, but had landed on my doormat like a warning shot. I walked straight across the street, not bothering to hide that I was recording him on my phone. "You got something you want to say, Ricky?" I stopped just short of his passenger door.
He didn't look at me.
He just reached for a bottle of soda in the cup holder and took a long drink before finally speaking. "You think all this is over?" he asked, voice low. "You think you fixed anything? You looking to get arrested again?" I tilted my head. "Because I've got 4 cameras pointed at you right now. One of them's got your license plate in full view." He laughed, but it was empty. "You kicked a hornet's nest you don't understand." "No," I said. "I kicked over a scam. You were just dumb enough to leave fingerprints all over it." He didn't reply to that. He just started his engine and peeled away without looking back. I stood there long enough to watch him turn out of the subdivision, then sent the video to Detective Emery with a short note. Still lurking. That night, I reviewed the footage from my side gate camera. Something had triggered the motion sensor at 2:30 in the morning the night before. When I zoomed in, I caught a glimpse of a figure crouched near my breaker box. Whoever it was wore a hoodie and gloves, but they didn't touch anything. Just scoped it out, then backed off fast when one of my floodlights clicked on. I forwarded that clip too. The next morning, Emery called. "That's him," he said. "We've got enough to bring him in again. Attempted trespass, possible stalking. He's not slick." "You think he's acting alone?"
"Hard to say.
But I'll tell you this, if he's dumb enough to return to the scene of a felony, he's either panicking or someone's pushing him." Angela called me an hour later. She sounded more tired than scared, like someone who'd been holding a glass of water at arm's length all day and finally felt it shaking. "I went through the financial records," she said. "There's something else." "What kind of something?" "Bank withdrawals." Vonda was funneling money, not just to those fake companies. She was moving it into what looks like a personal trust. Over 80,000, siphoned slowly, over 3 years. It's in a private credit union, under a name that doesn't match anyone in the HOA database. Think it's a ghost account? Maybe. But the withdrawals ramped up recently, like she was prepping to leave. I went quiet for a second. Then, "You think she's planning to disappear?" "She already started." I checked the court filings. She posted bail through a third-party bond agent based in Nevada. Not local. And her house? For sale as of yesterday. Cash-only listing. I didn't like any of it. That afternoon, I visited the city planning office with a request to look at recent permit filings for the neighborhood. I wanted to see if Ricky or anyone tied to Vonda had submitted anything new: plumbing, electrical, fencing. Anything that could give them a reason to be on properties legally. Sure enough, there was a permit submitted 2 weeks prior under the name Civic Solutions Group, the same shell company we'd already exposed. This one claimed they were replacing underground cabling for the HOA's irrigation system. It was pending, not yet approved, but had a signature stamped by a city employee. The signature didn't match the one on file. It was forged. I took a photo of the document and brought it straight to Emery. He met me at a diner off County Route 7, where we grabbed a booth in the back away from the lunch crowd. "You're saying they forged a city signature to get underground access?" he asked, flipping through the photos. "Looks that way. If this had gone through, Ricky would have had legal access to dig up half the common areas. Maybe even install whatever he wanted."
Jesus, Emery muterid.
That's conspiracy to commit fraud on a government entity. That's federal. He stood up and made a call right there in the diner. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I caught enough. He was calling in a favor someone higher up. 2 days later, federal investigators showed up. Angela and I weren't told the details, but we saw the suits walking into the HOA office, saw them collecting hard drives, ledgers, and boxes of documents. One of them paused outside the office and asked me if I was the homeowner who filed the initial complaint. I nodded. "Good work," he said. "We've been watching similar patterns across 3 counties. Looks like your HOA was part of a wider kickback ring." Turns out, Vonda wasn't just running a petty neighborhood scam. She was one of several HOA officers across the state who had been funneling money through fake maintenance contracts, using shell companies to embezzle funds, then hiding the profits in trusts registered out of state. The network was tight. All cash. All under the radar. Until she got sloppy. Until she cut my power. A week later, Ricky was arrested again, this time on federal wire fraud charges. He'd used HOA emails to falsify invoices and impersonate vendors. That made it interstate fraud, thanks to a single out-of-state payment routed through a server in Arizona. Vonda? She vanished. Skipped court. Bail bond defaulted. A warrant was issued, and her assets were frozen. Her house sale collapsed. Her accounts were seized. But she was gone. Angela took it hard. Not out of sympathy, but because of how close the neighborhood had come to real disaster. "She almost buried us," she said one night as we stood outside the community center, watching volunteers repaint the faded benches. "If she'd gotten that last payment through, we'd be insolvent." "But she didn't," I reminded her. "And now we're rebuilding." The interim board held elections 2 weeks later. Turnout was the highest in the neighborhood's history. Angela was confirmed as president. A retired CPA named Ramon took treasurer. And for the first time, the HOA voted to cap fines, require third-party audits, and publish all expenditures monthly online. The last change? A unanimous vote to require all board members to pass a background check and ethics training. I didn't run for anything, but I showed up to every meeting. Not because I wanted power, because I wanted to make sure no one ever tried to pull another stunt like Vonda did. One evening, as I sat on my porch watching kids ride scooters past my yard, a car I didn't recognize rolled slowly down the street. Windows tinted.
No plats.
It didn't stop. Just passed by once, then again 10 minutes later. I took out my phone, snapped a few photos, and sent them to Emery. He called back within the hour. "That same car's been spotted in 2 other neighborhoods we're investigating," he said. "Keep your cameras up. Keep your neighbors informed. And if anything feels off, call me." Immediately. I didn't ask if he thought Vonda was back. I didn't need to. The neighborhood was safe for now. But I knew something most people didn't. When you shine a light on rot, the rats scatter. But they always look for new shadows. The car with the blacked-out windows didn't return the next day, or the day after that. But I didn't relax. I had learned too much about how these people operated to believe silence meant safety. Vonda might have disappeared, but her tracks hadn't all been covered, and the system she built still had pieces moving in the background. Angela called me after the second board meeting under the new leadership. Her voice was tight, more focused than anxious this time. "They're finding financial inconsistencies deeper than any of us imagined," she said. "We hired a forensic accountant. She found a secondary ledger buried under archived HOA digital backups only accessible through an admin password that hadn't been used in over a year. What was in it? Payments. Dozens. Hidden transfers to third-party accounts labeled as insurance reimbursements. But there's no record of any claims being filed. No damage reports. Just descriptions like storm repairs and landscape restoration. All fake. Any idea where those payments went? 2 offshore accounts. The routing numbers traced to a bank in Belize. That was enough to pull in the feds again. Angela had already sent the data to a federal prosecutor who had reached out after Ricky's arrest. What no one expected was how fast the case escalated. Within 72 hours, subpoenas were issued. The Department of Justice filed a motion to seize the HOA's financial servers. The interim board complied and turned everything over. That same week, Angela's house was broken into. She wasn't home at the time, but the door had been jimmied with a pry bar, and her office was ransacked. Nothing was stolen, not her laptop, not her jewelry, not even the cash she kept in a drawer. Just papers scattered and 1 USB drive missing. The one she used to carry backups of the forensic ledger she'd uncovered. The responding officers cataloged everything, but their expressions were grim. One of them, a tall woman with salt and pepper hair and a badge clipped to her belt, pulled Angela aside while I was helping reattach the doorframe. "You're not just dealing with fraud anymore," she said. "This is organized financial crime. These people know what they're doing." Angela looked at me. "We thought we were just cleaning up HOA corruption." "We were," I said. "It just turns out the rot goes all the way to the foundation." After that, federal agents placed Angela under protective surveillance. She didn't fight it. She also didn't step down. In fact, she doubled down. At the third board meeting, she stood in front of over 70 homeowners and laid it all out. "There is a chance," she said, that the HOA you've been paying into for the past 5 years has been used to launder nearly $200,000 through fraudulent maintenance expenses, shell companies, and fake insurance claims. This isn't just mismanagement. It's criminal. And we're cooperating with every agency that shows up. The room went silent. Then someone clapped. Then everyone did. But applause didn't fix the problem. The HOA's actual operating funds were nearly gone. Whatever Vonda hadn't laundered, she'd spent or locked in legal limbo. So we did the only thing we could. We opened the books publicly and let the homeowners vote on every financial move going forward. At the same time, I worked with Emery on another angle. I've been wondering how Vonda managed to get so many of her shady permits through without anyone noticing. The forged signature on the irrigation permit wasn't a one-off.
It was a pattern.
I pulled up several other permits filed over the past 3 years: tree removals, paving work, even a supposed ADA ramp installation near the clubhouse that never actually happened. Most of them had been rubber-stamped with initials, not full names. But one of them, a zoning adjustment request from 18 months ago, bore a full signature: Harold T. Menzies. I remembered that name. He used to work in the city's permit office. Retired last year. I found his number through a mutual acquaintance and gave him a call. Harold, did you ever sign off on a zoning exemption for Willow Bend's HOA? He paused for a long moment. No, I didn't. Why? Because your name's on one. 17 months ago. That's not possible. I was on medical leave in Arizona that entire month. I couldn't have signed anything. I sent him a scan of the permit. He confirmed immediately it was a forgery. That was the final thread. Harold filed an affidavit. The DOJ added document fraud to the list of charges. The case against Vonda was now sprawling across multiple jurisdictions. Wire fraud, tax evasion,
Forgery. Conspiracy.
embezzlement, and now identity theft. Then a break. Interpol flagged a passport issued under the name Vonda Kensington at a checkpoint in Guatemala. The photo was Vonda's. She'd tried to slip through using a fake identity pieced together using her real middle name and an altered birth date. She was detained and placed on a flight back to the U.S. under federal custody. She landed in handcuffs. Her arraignment was closed to the public, but Angela and I were both subpoenaed to testify for the grand jury. When I took the stand, I laid it all out: the power shutoff, the forged permits, the fake companies, the threats, the surveillance footage, the tampered breaker. I brought the printed invoice from Arlo, the original HOA letter Vonda taped to my door, and the chain of emails between Ricky and Civic Solutions. The federal prosecutor asked only one question after I finished. Did you ever suspect that turning your power back on would lead to an international fraud indictment? No, I said. But I knew something wasn't right, and I wasn't going to let it slide. The grand jury returned a full indictment, 27 counts. Vonda's trial was set for federal court. She was denied bail this time. Ricky took a plea deal in exchange for testifying against her and her co-conspirators in the HOA network. The neighborhood didn't celebrate, not in a loud way. There were no banners, no parties. But people started walking their dogs with lighter steps. Kids played basketball in driveways without parents nervously checking the street. Angela resumed planning the community garden, this time with full transparency and a vote on every vendor. I came home one evening to find a handwritten card in my mailbox.
No envelope.
Just a note from Mr. Jensen. You lit the fuse. We're all safer because you didn't back down. I didn't keep the card. I didn't need to. Seeing the neighborhood work together again, that was enough. The cameras stayed up, not out of paranoia, but principle. Just like the new HOA charter, which now required full audit trails, rotating board seats, and mandatory financial disclosures for every contractor hired. We had seen what happened when power went unchecked. And we weren't going to let that happen again. Angela asked me once if I ever regretted pushing back. Not for a second. Because sometimes all it takes is one fuse, one spark, one well-documented invoice, and the whole rotten foundation comes crashing down.